Welcome to the collision. He's Atan Thomas. He's Chuck Modiono. I'm Dave Zirin. We come here to bring you the best in thoughts, interviews, and the word from the world of resistance. I'm so happy who we have on this week because the question of Palestine is so central to all of our minds and stopping the Israeli genocide. So what we have on our show today is a person who we need more of. I wish there were a million folks just like this person. They're a journalist and an influencer who has been fighting the genocide in Gaza and, has been fighting it at places that you may have heard of, like Columbia University. So there's a lot to talk to her about. We're very excited about it. Her name is Jess Natale. Jess, how are you doing?
I'm doing as good as can be. How are all of you?
Doing okay. I'm going to start with the first question because this was something I really wanted to ask you when I heard you were coming on, as somebody who has been part of the struggle for more than just a couple of days. Like we are seeing people right now who celebrated the brutalization of protesters, of Columbia students, of Mahmoud Khalil. And now they're all of a sudden greatly concerned about the famine in Gaza caused by Israel and underwritten by the United States. All sorts of, the head of J Street, for example, called it a genocide yesterday. And it makes me think a little bit about how any anti-fascist or anti-Nazi before 1939 was labeled as suspicious in this country, and they called them prematurely anti-fascist, and that was a cause enough to investigate them. They're basically saying that people like yourself are problematic and deserve to be hounded out of public life because you were prematurely against something that all of a sudden they're so concerned about. So the question is, how do we receive these people in the movement? How do we receive people, say, who are influenced by them in the movement, which is a more complicated question, or do we receive them at all?
My answer is not going to be the popular answer, to be totally honest with you. I
Good.
don't want a coalition build with people who have been silent, watching human beings massacred on a daily basis for almost 2 years. I have no interest in that. I have no interest in the people who were sending me death threats during the election because I refused to participate in sitting by and allowing Joe Biden to get away with his complicity in genocide and not say anything. The people who were celebrating me getting arrested at protests, those people who I can see now, their older messages, and this is just speaking personally, their older messages to me, condemning me, telling me I don't deserve to have a platform because I'm misusing it, calling me anti-Semitic, sending me death threats. And now months later, it's, I was wrong. Oh my God, these people are starving. Oh my God, these people have been starving. The people of Gaza have been starving. This is not new to just the last couple of months. We were out in the streets chanting about people in Gaza starving back in 2023. They have been starving the people of Gaza. Israel and the US have been starving the people of Gaza. So I have no interest in welcoming these people into any sort of movement with open arms because they have been working against us the entire time.
And before I throw it to Atan, to be clear, when you said since 2023, you meant before October 2023, because the famine.
Well, yeah. So the people have been starved since the blockade really started back in the end of 2006, 2007. They say Israel pulled out. They didn't pull out. You could pull out and still make a full perimeter, and you're blocking the entrance and exit of goods and people, and you're getting rid of their airport. So they have no actual way that you're setting up a perimeter of where people are allowed to fish for that level of food. So no, they have been starving for nearly 20 years. But since the genocide began in October 2023, particularly, we have been screaming about the Palestinians in Gaza are starving, and no one cared.
Thank you for that. Atan, please.
It's interesting because there's so much misinformation being spread across the U.S. airways, and most recently there was a head coach for Auburn, Bruce Pearl, and he is trying to convince everyone that the GFHF is doing this amazing job, and they're trying to help the people of Gaza, and they're doing. And I'm like, well, that's not the information that I'm seeing. What how do you combat misinformation that is just constantly being perpetuated on the American airways?
How do I? I try my best, and I've been consistently doing this. I'm showing you what the people of Gaza want you to see. And that's how I've been using my platform. So I can create like a post, one of my good friends runs a page called Let's Talk Palestine, which he created back in 2021 to combat a lot of the misinformation that is, not even just Gaza, the occupied West Bank as well. So we work together to put to like talking points almost of how to respond when somebody says, there's nobody starving in Gaza. It's like, okay, well, here are the facts actually. But that only goes so far, You need to see things. We are seeing this is the most documented genocide in the history of this world. We are seeing this. So was it George Orwell that said the party wanted you to not believe what you were seeing with your own eyes? That's what we've been up against. So you combat misinformation by showing people the reality. And obviously, platforms like Meta, they don't want you to see that. So they suppress it or they ban you from those platforms. So as much as I hate Elon Musk and as much as I hate Twitter or now X, that has been such an incredible tool throughout this genocide. Truly, social media across the board has been a great tool to show you. So you could say there's no starvation, the IOF isn't targeting civilians, but there's video evidence and documentation showing you that that's not true.
Chuck, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add, because Atan brought up GHF right here in DC, the Palestinian Youth Movement, the last 2 Fridays have been at the homes of executives of GHF. Tom Ackery, they're at his home and educating the community that their neighbor is a war criminal. So I think you're going to see more of that, but I want to let everyone know that is what's happening in DC. Don't let them rest, to give them no peace, and let everybody know who they really are. But Jess, last week, I didn't know it, but I was probably standing very close in the proximity of you in the JFK airport for what I thought was a beautiful welcoming to Chris Smalls, who put his life on the line, was beaten, probably not incoincidentally, as the only Black American there as part of the Freedom Flotilla on the Handala, and he gets a great warm welcome. Why was his trip important? What was the significance of that moment and where we are?
Yeah. So for anyone who might be listening who doesn't know Chris, he is the leader of and the founder of the Amazon Labor Union, which was the first Amazon warehouse in Staten Island to unionize to unionize in the country. And he has been on the ground fighting not only for labor rights, but for rights across the board. I have seen him out at so many actions. Him and I were rubbing shoulders, kind of like you and I were. And we are friends now. And he is just such an amazing force. He cares about people and he makes the connection in such a beautiful way to everything is connected. The labor rights here in the US are connected to Palestinian liberation in Palestine. He made that connection. He's been speaking about that connection for years. And him being on the flotilla, I think it came as a surprise to me, honestly. And I think a lot of people were surprised. But it shows that it's, as much as Chris is like a celebrity kind of figure, he's this amazing activist, he's still just a civilian. He's a regular person. And he thought this was fucking wrong. So can I swear on this? I'm sorry. I could swear. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, what he saw was wrong. He doesn't want that kind of world for his kids, and he has expressed that as well. And I think seeing him, being concerned, obviously, for him, and hearing his experience on the flotilla and his treatment. Mm-hmm. And as much as we're talking about Chris, I do want to say he has been very clear. It's not about him. It's about the people in Palestine. And so everything he does is for the people. And that is why I think he got such a beautiful welcome at JFK, because he is for the people of the world, really.
Yeah, I find it so incredibly silly when people criticize Chris, saying that he's wants to be a celebrity or is chasing clout, because we live in an age where I could be a celebrity in the next 30 seconds by uploading up to YouTube me like talking with my own butt or something. There are so much easier ways to be a celebrity than going on a flotilla and getting beat up by Israeli police officers. It's the most absurd thing, often said by people who have no interest in stopping the genocide. But and I don't mean to stay on Chris, but an angle of it I think is really important. The Canadian trade unions have done a really admirable job building support against the genocide. The US trade unions have not. And here's Chris, a founder of the Amazon Labor Union, as you said. And so this isn't really even a Chris question, but why is it important to make this issue one that, as the Canadians say, the unions really do need to pick up and take to heart?
My answer is a little deeper, I think.
Good.
I think in the US, they keep us so worn down. Everybody's so fucking worn down. Everybody's exhausted. Everybody's just trying to live. Everybody's trying to live sometimes with 2 or 3 jobs to keep a roof over their head, trying to afford rent, trying to afford groceries. People are sick and desperate. And I think they're doing that on purpose so that the people don't recognize our collective power. And so unions who are fighting for the right to unionize, with so much union busting happening in this country, particularly with this president who doesn't support unions, I think that Americans are also very individualistic, and they like to weigh, what am I going to lose if I do this? Is this really as important as, X, Y, and Z? So I think that's the deeper conversation. And I think that particularly other countries, they don't have the same issue because they have a better quality of life. So they're able to, weigh the risk and the reward of doing something heroic, really, like taking a stance against sending off weapons to Israel. So I think that's also why we see a lot more direct action in the UK with PAL Action, which, they're trying to say is a terrorist organization now. But they have incredible movement happening on the direct action front. And I think it is genuinely because not every cop is carrying a gun, so they're not afraid to get shot in the face if they do something. It's just the quality of life. And I think that, yeah, that's a much deeper conversation. And I wish that wasn't the case.
E?
Let me ask you this. In all of your coverage and your research and what you've been observing, we're talking about the relationship with Trump and Netanyahu. We're talking about, of course, the relationship between, America and Israel. It doesn't seem to really change no matter who is the president of the United States. It seems like there is maybe different sugarcoating on it, but it's at the end of the day, there's still, blank check. You can do whatever you want to. How do you energize voters when it seems like no matter who is in office, nothing changes for Palestinians?
It's a good question. That is a great question. I wish I had the answer to that, because I have not found many principled politicians who are willing to take a bold stand against Israel. And, I say Israel with quotation marks. I do that on the SO page, and I just want to make that clear. It's like weird to even say it. Yeah, like, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, they took principled stances. They said this is Cori Bush specifically called it a genocide very early on. And AIPAC made sure that she was out. So how do we find principled people to be in positions of power when we have these massive dark money groups like AIPAC and all of their subsidiaries that we don't even know where that money's coming from, thanks to, this also, it just gets so much deeper. I feel like I don't want to get so deep, but probably overturn Citizens United and then get dark money out of politics, and then find some principled people that are not going to be bought and paid for. And their decisions will actually be influenced by the American people versus by special interests. I think that's the route we take, because I don't really think, people like, for example, Ted Cruz, who will literally go to bat until his very last breath for Israel. I don't really think he cares about Israel. Like, on a personal level, I really don't think he cares. But I do think that he's getting a lot of money to pretend to care. And that's what matters to him. So getting people into positions of power that actually don't give a shit about money, that's important. But also politics in the US is driven by money. So
Yeah, and the Christian Zionists in particular, they own receipts on Ted Cruz.
Oh
And
yes.
frankly, the whole what was a fringe movement in the Republican Party when I was growing up, now is the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've reckoned with that at all. Chuck, please.
Yeah, unfair question coming. I'm just gonna let you know right now.
Ooh.
We've been screaming at the White House for a couple of years. We've done a gazillion rallies. We've built awareness as the polls show. And we know we can't rely on both parties. I think minus their three members of Congress, Summerlee, Rashida, maybe Al Green, who voted against continued funding for the Iron Dome. Outside of that, where do the activists move forward? What are some of the demonstrations and actions that you've seen or niches that you think, hey, we need to tap into this a little bit more than that? So it's kind of an activist question because a lot of people, they want to make change, but they're not quite sure how to move forward.
I am a huge advocate for direct action. And like, I just said a couple minutes ago, I don't think that that is as attainable of a goal here as it is in the UK, for a slew of reasons. Particularly the cops here will shoot us on sight, and they have no problem doing that, as we know. We have a sustained within our lifetime, a group here in New York City.
Yeah.
They have called for sustained action every single day outside of the UN. And we had the first action last week, actually on Monday, outside of the Egyptian consulate or the Egyptian mission down near the UN. And we stayed outside so that no one inside could leave. They weren't leaving. They were afraid to leave and face the crowd. That's a form of direct action. I don't think that what we're seeing with, and all respect to Code Pink, they're in DC every single day. They're at the Capitol. They're in people's offices screaming at them. They're in the cafeterias. That's not changing anything. I think political education is something that we also need to tap into. Any group that's organizing needs to tap into political education. And that's not even just US politics. I think that expands well beyond, like, when we're talking about Palestine, what does resistance actually look like in Palestine? Because we have been given in the US such a very warped idea of what Palestinian resistance is. And we have dictated the terms of what the word terrorist means. I stand firmly in the belief that the United States is the greatest terrorist this world has ever seen. And so when we say, okay, well, Hamas is a terrorist group, maybe shift that, maybe shift people's idea of what that means. And that is all part of political education. And I think that will help people. I don't have the perfect answer for that, to be honest with you.
No,
Well,
it's
tell
a
me.
tough, that's a tough question. And definitely tough to answer. And I know, Dave, before you go to the last question, I just want to jump in here really quick. And I want to ask you, and this is something that I really struggle with. And I asked Khalid Bey the same question. When and you mentioned before that social media, you're doing an amazing job and being able to show the atrocity of what's going on, show the images, show you know what I mean, for everybody to be able to see. Um, Famously, after Emmett Till was killed and murdered and charred and lynched and everything like that, his mother insisted on an open casket funeral so the world can see the horrors of everything. So, and I understand that. And it should be enough to be able to change anybody's minds as soon as they see young kids starving to death and and shot and everything like that, right? But it's not, and it's heartbreaking to be able to know that there are a large portion of I'll just say America. I won't even say right wing or whatever, just America in general, that can look at those images and not be moved. You know what I mean? Not say that this is something that should not be happening, no matter what anything else that you have to believe in. This right here, you see kids being starved to death, is something that should not be happening. Talk about the lack of humanity of life when it comes to Palestinians that is in existence all across America. Because, and I'll just say this plainly, if they were little white kids, the entire reaction would be completely different. But I'll give you the floor. You understand what I'm saying? What speak on that for me.
Yeah. Hollywood and major media platforms have done a fantastic job of ingraining Islamophobia into our brains post 9/11 every single day. Does not matter what the topic is, doesn't matter what the movie is, it doesn't matter what the TV show is. There is always a bad guy, and that bad guy is laced with Islamophobic, narrative, with the just the visuals, everything. That's been strategic. That has been very strategic. And I think, like you said, if it was white kids, if it was white parents holding their children's body parts in plastic bags and screaming and crying on the street somewhere, we would be all over it. But we have been conditioned to view Palestinians as our enemy, and particularly any kind of Arab, Muslim in the Middle East, really, but on this, Palestinians as the enemy, as less than worthy of our empathy and our sympathy. And I think it goes back to kind of what I said before, is we've crafted a narrative of terrorism in this country. We've crafted a narrative. And so not only, and I can speak to this as somebody who grew up like post 9/11 learning about it in school, we're not learning, the full picture. We're learning a very crafted, very whitewashed version of history, and very recent history. And it's not until you kind of break free from that and you start reading, like you start reading and you start expanding your mind and you start seeing like, no, this country is wrong. And I think that's how you break free from that mindset. And I don't want to say you can learn to be empathetic, but you can learn that you're hating the wrong people for the wrong reasons. And so you have misplaced anger, and your empathy is not being extended in the right places. And that's on purpose.
I'll also throw out there, Atan, you mentioned Emmett Till. I could thinking of was that the genius, the tragic genius of Mamie Till was taking advantage in 1955 that we had such a thing as a national media, which a lot of folks really hadn't caught on to yet. So that one photo that started in Jet went the equivalent of viral back then, at a time when virality was not even really a thing. And I can totally see the white supremacists being like, this can't happen again. We need our own counter narratives. We need our own lies to counter their truths. You saw that again after Vietnam, when the media was in there showing the realities of war. They're like, nah, media is going to be embedded from now on. So they counter moved to our efforts to show truth. And now we need a new move. We need more. We need to figure out ways to put this in people's faces so they understand their complicity when they choose silence. Last question for you, Jess. You've been so great with your time, but being somebody who lives in Brooklyn, being somebody who is at Columbia, how can I not ask you about Zohran Mamdani and his efforts to win the mayoralship? Zohran, somebody who was at Columbia in solidarity, and then you have people like Eric Adams who ordered the brutality of Columbia protesters. That seems pretty distinct, but I also know that for social movements, elections can be very tricky. So as someone who's in the struggle, what would a Mamdani victory mean, if much?
This is also a deeper conversation, I feel, I'm afraid.
That's okay.
He's done a fantastic job of reaching all people in this city. I think his past as an activist has guided a lot of his very people-focused platform. And I think that's fantastic. I think he is not part of the movement. He is not part of the Palestinian liberation movement, and he hasn't been for quite some time. And I think listening to my friends within the movement who are Palestinian, who feel very betrayed by the interviews he's doing where he's saying, well, no, I do think Israel has a right to exist, and condemning, the chants that we're doing out at protests. I think that is working against us in many ways. And so I don't think his proximity to the movement is necessarily important. I think his backtracking on his once upon a time idea of defunding the police recently, I think that was a couple days ago, he said he's grown from that idea. I think that there are a lot of red flags and issues that I would love to address when he becomes mayor, because my ethos has always been, I'm going to hold anybody accountable. I don't care if you're a Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're independent. If you're working for the people, you need to be held accountable by the people. So he is the best candidate we have for mayor. I will proudly vote for him, but I do think that if he wants support from the movement, he needs to be a little more tapped into the movement and hear the concerns of the movement as they're coming out. And I've been there in person as people have been trying to express those concerns, and they have not been met, with the most open arms. So yeah, it's going to be interesting leading up to November.
Absolutely. As a quick follow-up, do you mean you've expressed them to people in his inner circle, or you've gotten some FaceTime to say, hey, you need to do this a different way?
Video that went viral for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately, was one that I took of one of my friends expressing his, genuine concern and frustration with his constant Israel has the right to exist narrative. Because it's not, and this was said in the video from my friend who is Palestinian from the West Bank, it's not your land to talk about. So it's not your land. It's not your right to talk about this. So, I have been there when that's happened. I know that conversations have happened with his inner circle to try to set up meetings, and that hasn't come to fruition. But the Palestinian liberation movement is it's large, So I don't really know what conversations he's having with people I'm not affiliated with, but I can say from where I sit and my circle and the people I'm surrounded by, I think that the concern is very much, please stop leveraging this narrative because you're hurting us.
Well,
go ahead,
maybe. Well, we're just about to wrap up. Chuck, did you have a last question? I'm sorry.
No, I know we're out of time. I was just simply saying, I think the most important thing that stands out is if you vote for him, hold him accountable from day one, because we've seen signs and we have history, AOC, others who've drifted. So I think we have enough history that we hold him accountable from day one. Nobody is going to come save anybody without being held accountable.
That's just the way it is. Well said. Speaking of well said, Jess Natale, you kept saying we were asking you deep questions, but you made them very clear answers out of deep questions. So really appreciate your time with us here on The Collision.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, happy to have you. We'll be back right after this.